I'm Penny. I'm from Healthy Tasmania. And just before we get started, I want you to do something for me for a moment. I just want you to stop and just listen really closely. And now on the count of 3, I want you to clap. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we clap. Okay? I want all of us to do it together. 1, 2, 3. Could you hear that? That is the collective wisdom that we've been learning about our mental well-being after the last 4 weeks, just filtering out into our communities. And that's the best bit, I think, about these sessions. Even though that it's you that's logging in and learning, just like clapping, when you put it into practice, everybody else can hear it too, because we start to change the way we act. We can't help talking about what we've learned. I wonder who's been talking about what they've learned when they go out of this. Oh, I heard this person today, and guess what they showed me last week with David Backer? Look at this app that I've downloaded. So I just want you to know that while you're coming on, you're obviously not only just improving yourself, but you're also improving or helping to support the people around you and your communities around you, which is why we just love that you've been taking the time to come along and log on to these sessions. As I said, I'm Penny Terry. I'm the Creative Director at Healthy Tasmania. This is my 4th Mentally Well session that I've attended, but it's my first as host. So anything could happen. Oh, just kidding. We are very well practiced, but we are online. Things do go wrong, as you've probably experienced on online formats before. So this is just an early disclaimer that there might be some lag in the computer and the way that it's all getting out to you. So we do apologise for that, and we hope that you can bear with us. We might have a setting that's been reset by Zoom because they're always updating their security. So do, just bear with us for that. We'll work it out, and if we can't, we might ask you in the chat box to help us out, and we can do it as a big group because we all are all in this together. One more thing before we get going. As I've mentioned a couple of times, we are recording, and that's so that you can watch it later because we drop out or you drop out, so you can pass it on to other people. Also, you can go back and refresh your memory and remind yourself if there's something that you missed. But what that does mean is that if you ask a question and you use your name and I say your name, then that will be recorded. I can't see you, I can't hear you. So if you're in your jammies or you want to go and get a cup of tea, I will have no idea about that, and that won't be part of the recording. But I might say your name. The way, if you don't want that to be part of the recording, you can choose to be anonymous in the Q&A tab. So you can choose to do that at any time, but your participation here is permission, if you like, to be a part of the recording, sort of. Now, the easiest way to find the recordings is to go to our Facebook page at Healthy Tasmania and click on events. You can also see them at the Starting Point Neighbourhood House Facebook page too. And look, if Facebook isn't your thing, the recordings are also on our website on our homepage, which is healthytasmania.com.au, or it's just there on the sign. I'm trying to do this through mirror image, which is interesting. Look, we're currently also whacking them all up on YouTube as well. So soon you'll be able to see them there. We'll pop that up on our Facebook page when we can make it all work. Now, whether this is your first, second, third, fourth, 5th session, thanks for joining us today. We hope it will be another fantastic Mentally Well session. And we're so proud to bring you this program on behalf of the Starting Point Neighbourhood House in Tasmania. In fact, as people have already started to do, if you could perhaps hit me up in the chat box and let me know what session this is for you. We've got a couple of people. This is number 5. They've been to every one. You'll find the chat box down the bottom of your screen. Just hover your mouse over there and let me know how many you've been to. I'll remind you, the first session was Laughter is Medicine with Jenny McGregor. It's hilarious. The second one was Mindfulness with the wonderful Rosie Green. Then we had Wendy French, who was helping us better understand the way our mental health operates, so that we can look after ourselves and other people during isolation. We had David Backer last week with the apps that might be useful. And today, well, hang on, I'll get to that in a moment. Helen, this is your 2nd. Hello, Kim, it's her 4th. Great to see you here. So I just want to tell you how it will work today. Rosemary, this is the first one. Great to have you here. Mike's been to 3, plus seen a couple of recordings. We love to see you chatting in the chat box. You've got me as your host, so you'll be able to see me when I'm talking. We've also got a presenter, and we are the only 2 people who can be seen or heard. As I said, so if you're in your jammies or you're going away to make a cup of tea or you've got kids in the background or whatever, we can't see that. We won't know. We can all chat as you are doing, so keep that coming. We love to hear where you are, what you're thinking, any thoughts going through your brains. We also encourage you to use the Q&A option. So if you just hover your mouse along the bottom of the screen, you'll see the thing that says Q&A. Click on it, and that's where you can ask questions. And you can tick a box that makes you anonymous, as I mentioned before. So get the questions and the chat coming in. I'll stop our presenter and ask those questions at appropriate times throughout the session. It's 45 minutes today. The title of today's session is Stress Management. The last 3 months, 2 months, stress, it's something that most of us have probably talked about commonly with the people around us. Maybe stress isn't the word, maybe we don't know what to put around it. We're going to learn a bit more about that today. I even reckon our presenter's possibly been stressed at time, and then she's pulled out her basket full of strategies and techniques that she's got to help her cope with that stress. I'll introduce her now. Her name is Caroline Thain. She is a mental health clinician who does a number of roles here in and around Launceston. And I'll just let her now reach into that big basket that she's got so that she can hand out the tips to all of you who are with us today. So Caroline, over to you.
Thanks, Pen. What a lovely introduction. I am so excited to be here. That's sort of my natural disposition, probably, is excitement. And in my excitement, I do tend to talk an awful lot. So I will be very reliant on Pen to just remind me of the questions that pop up, and I will try and answer them as I go. I guess I wanted to start it today, guys, by, I guess, firstly, also very important to me, acknowledging the traditional owners of our land, our First Australians. And I think right now there's a lot of stuff going on around the globe that's really stressful and incredibly distressing and sad. So I think that's really important that I do that. And in that, I pay my respects to elders, both past, present and emerging. So the topic today, as Pen said, is stress management. Now, I'm going to do a really groovy thing and I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Oh, there we go. So today we really want to talk about stress, and hopefully if I don't talk too much, we will also be able to get to some tips on sleep and how to get a good night's sleep. So this is what we'll cover today. So what stress is exactly. Most of us have got a pretty good idea about that. How it affects us. How do we know we're feeling stressed? What can we do about it? The relationship between sleep and stress, and how to get a good night's sleep. So let's start, guys, by talking about what stress actually is. So I'd be really curious to know some words that kind of spring to mind when you think of stress. So feel free to kind of write those in the little chat box perhaps. So stress, the most important thing I want to say to begin with is stress is actually really normal. So if you look, it says stress is the body's natural response when a change is occurring or when there's a stressor in our environment. So it's the body's way of reacting to changes with a physical, mental and emotional response. And stress can be caused by your body and brain because of environmental things that are going on in your life. So I'm going to now I'm just going to stop sharing and come back in. So have we got some little thoughts about what words sort of come to mind when people think of stress?
We don't have anything coming up just yet, but some of those ones you had on the screen, Kaz, around worried. I don't have a word for it, but it's this.
That's really good. That's a good place to start, Pen.
Yeah.
I think some people feel a bit, I have a bit of a theory about stress, that people feel a bit more comfortable talking about stress as opposed to worry. Oh, agitated, that's a really good one.
We've got one here, worry, panic, physically unwell. Someone says Bundy and Coke, agitated.
Yeah, excellent. So I think sorry, coming back. So my theory about that we're maybe a little bit more comfortable talking about stress, it's because it's sort of, it evokes more of a physical words that kind of come in. But actually it's tied in with our emotions. And I think, you know, what you were saying before, Penny, about why this is really important now, take a deep breath, because I am going to talk about COVID-19, which I know you might all be a little bit over. But that's why this is actually really important right now, is that we've all been, for most of us, sitting in a lot of stress in relation to COVID-19. And because COVID-19 is a real thing, it is out there. So of course, for a lot of us, we will have been sitting with a lot of stress in our bodies. A really good analogy is if you imagine this is like stress in this little cup. And imagine if you were kind of hanging on to this out like this all day. For those of you who've got a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or, you know, have you got a cup there, Pen? Yep,
yeah,
excellent.
I've just popped it out front.
Nice one. So imagine stress is a little bit like, and this is what I think's probably been happening for a lot of people in managing our current climate around COVID. It's like we've been hanging on to this cup, but without putting it down, because it's been constant and unrelenting. So imagine if you were sort of hanging on to that like that for a long period of time. What would happen to your arm, or what's happening to your arm, Pen?
Yeah.
I'm just going to have a sip of my water.
Sure. It's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. So it's not necessarily, feels like it's not about what's in there, because, like, disclaimer, it's empty. But the longer I hold it for, the heavier it gets, even though there's nothing in there.
Exactly. So the point is if, you know, even when we're carrying low levels, so if I'd sort of, you know, had a smaller amount of water in there, or like yours, it was totally empty, but you're carrying a small amount for a long period of time, that gets really heavy and has an impact on our bodies. And it certainly has an impact on things like our sleep, on how we relate to our friends and family, so our relationships can impact on our mood. And stress is really sneaky like that. It can sort of have this compounded cumulative effect on us. So that's my little analogy.
I'll jump in there. And Helen said that it makes that she can't think. Hayden said feels like he's crowded internally. And I will just jump to a question here, which is, why is walking on the beach good for stress?
Ooh, I love that question. The reason I love that question is there's been a lot of research and science done about that. So when you're actually, if you think about what's happening in your mind when you're on the beach, where your focus and attention is, our focus and our attention is often in the present. So we're often smelling in the beautiful sea air, we're often watching and listening to the rhythm of the waves. And we know that that actually brings our mind into the present moment. And the side effect of that is often calm and relaxation. So yes, there is a lot of science and evidence about the relaxation effects of the beach. That's amazing. Great question. Okay. Sorry, were you going to ask me another question, Pen?
No, that's it. Go for it.
So the other thing that goes hand in hand with stress is this word called resilience. It gets bandied around a lot, and I think there's some misinterpretation. Resilience is not about being invincible. It is not about saying things like, I don't actually get stressed. That doesn't happen to me. It's not about not being in touch with our feelings and our emotions. Resilience is actually about taking time to tune in to those tricky feelings like stress in our bodies, and taking time to acknowledge when we're feeling overwhelmed, and then processing that. It's also okay to be overwhelmed and feel a bit off course, and then coming back to sort of functioning as you would normally day to day. So you'll often hear this thing called bouncing back in terms of resilience. And I suppose the reason I want to talk about it is there's this bit of an idea that if you say things like, oh, I just don't get stressed as a person, then therefore you're resilient. And that's sort of, that doesn't actually make sense, because our brains are actually designed to feel stress and process stress. And we have a body response to manage that. That's actually really, really important. So resilience is about acknowledging vulnerabilities and acknowledging feeling. And that is actually our biggest strength. So I hope that kind of makes sense, but please jump in and ask any questions. But resilience is about acknowledging when you're feeling stressed. And I'm really hoping that today, the next little bit of work we're going to do is about how do we acknowledge or know when we're feeling stressed. So I'm going to come back into my little share screen if I can. And so we've talked about kind of what words we use to describe stress and what that's kind of all about. Oh, now, so you had some really awesome presenters in the lovely Wendy and the lovely Rosie, who did this really funky thing with their hands. So for those of you who've, you know, you're experienced in this course and you've done like 4 already. So remember, they did this little demonstration about stress or anxiety. I think a lot of them were talking about as well. So when we think about where stress comes from, it comes from our brain, okay? So remember, Wendy and Rosie were talking about your thumb is like the emotion center of your brain. And if you fold that into your hand, that's pretty much where it sits, in the middle of your brain, okay? Now, also, I would like to tell you that your brains are much bigger than your fist. So don't panic, don't think, oh my God, my brain is tiny. Your brain is not tiny. I'm sure it's much, much bigger than your fist. But what happens, okay, this really cool thing that happens is that when we feel stress, the blood goes to this part of our brain, this emotion center, okay? And then we have this body response. So we get stuff, really cool stuff happening in our body, like we get a shot of immunity, we get some blood goes to our like big muscle groups in our arms and our legs, because our brain is preparing us to kind of fight or flight or, you know, really respond. But it does this kind of other thing, which is a bit tricky. So we don't get as much blood to this prefrontal cortex. Now, what that is responsible for is kind of planning and problem solving and that kind of thing. So it's actually really common when we're like more acutely stressed for us to not be able to think very straight. And I think Rosie and Wendy also talked about flipping the lid. I don't know if any of you remember that saying, oh my goodness, that person just flipped their lid. That's kind of like what happens for them. So they've got lots of emotion pumping around here, and you kind of flip your lid and sort of get really, really stressed and have a big emotional response. So that is the, I guess, neuroscience, very basically, about where stress comes from in our brain, but why it's important. And if you go back to caveman days, threats were an everyday occurrence. So that threat system, so another word to think about stress is, and that emotion center is like our threat system. I'm just going to stop sharing so you can look at my animated face when I'm talking about this. Our threat system was really, really important. And of course, it's still important today because it keeps us safe. So another way to think about, I've got another metaphor for you. I love a good metaphor. Is your threat system is a little bit like a fire alarm. Or a smoke alarm, a smoke alarm. Now, but we all maybe can have our smoke alarm wired a little bit differently. So for some of us, our smoke alarm might go off when we burn the toast. And for others, you know, the whole house has to be on fire for our smoke alarm to be activated. So we can all manage sometimes varying levels of stress is what I'm trying to say. And that can be a number of factors that influence that. So they can be genetic, they can be environmental. So it is important to understand that as individuals, we can all hold and respond to different levels of stress. And that's really normal and that's totally okay. Any questions about our smoke alarms / threat system?
We don't have any questions so far, but I absolutely love that analogy, Kaz, I've written that, I've said the fire before it will bead, I mean beep there in the chat. And I guess one of the things that people worry about or might think about sometimes is, why am I getting so stressed about this? And why aren't they getting so stressed? Am I overreacting? I mean, that word overreacting comes in all the time. And I guess I'd just love to hear your thoughts on whether it's a useful word or not.
Oh, no, I don't think so. Coming back to my comment before, I worry more about people who say to me, I don't get stressed. So this is where, so it sort of ties into that understanding that our brains are designed to feel stress. That's very, very important. It keeps us safe. And I think it was David in the last presentation who talked about stress or anxiety can actually help us perform. So it has a definite function. And I guess, you know, when people say they don't feel it or they think someone's overreacting, yeah, I think that's quite unhelpful. I think, yeah, I guess I don't think it is particularly useful. I think what's more useful is
a different fire alarm setting, perhaps. A different fire alarm setting.
Yeah, yeah. So if you come back to this other metaphor, like cup, some cups are bigger than others. So some people can hold a little bit more stress than others. And as I said before, it's really important then to understand that a lot of us don't get choice in that. And as I said before, it's about how we are all individually made up, and also to do with our own environmental stresses that are going on for us. So,
I was going to say, well, this might be a question that we've got that's come through, which is stress cumulative?
Yes, it can be, definitely. So we can have like an acute stress response, or it can build over time. So I'm going to come into my next slide. So it can be both, to answer that question. I'll come on to my next slide, if that's okay. Oh, so that is me. That's my stress face. So what I want you guys to think about now is, before we sort of drill down into what your body responses are when you feel stressed, I want you to think kind of environmental. I will get to that picture in a second. I want you to think about, what is it in your environment that are your barometers? So what I mean by that is, coming back to that statement about everybody does actually feel stressed at different times. That's really normal. There are often things in our environment that we might respond to in different ways when we're feeling stress. So coming back to that participant's comment about, is it cumulative? This is sometimes a really good place to start. If you're sitting in some low level stress that's sort of accumulating, is you'll start to respond in different ways. Now, for me, this is a really nice example of how I respond. So there is somebody who owns that hideous slipper in my house. And when it is left around and just, you know, in the middle of the living room floor, if I'm not traveling too well, my response to that slipper or to other household items might be a little bit more emotional than normal. So that's my little barometer. I know that I tend to respond more emotionally to things that are left on the floor if I'm carrying some low level stress. if I'm ticking along okay and I don't have too much stress going on, I would just go, hey guys, can you just pick that slipper up or pick the towel up off the floor? I know they are my little barometers. So I want you guys to just take a little moment and think about what are some of your barometers in your environment. If you are sitting with someone, watching it together, it could be a colleague, it could be a housemate or family member, and you think, oh, I don't really know what mine are, ask the person next to you, say, hey, how do you know I'm starting to be a little bit stressed? And they might actually tell you something like that you just didn't even know. They might go, oh, you like clunk the coffee cup when you put it back on the shelf, or, you know, you throw things into the sink. I don't know. But they can be really useful because that's the best way for us to start to recognise what our own body clues are when we're starting to feel a bit stressed. So I'm just going to stop sharing that really intense picture of me. Come back to the normal intense picture of me. So have we got any little, slamming the door? Yes. Guilty. I have been known to do that. Especially the front door. There's something quite like, boom, about the front door.
Being short with the kids is one that I have. Being short, no time, no patience.
Yes, totally. Morning routines tend to be mine as well. It can sort of, you get really stressed and be much more acutely aware of time. I mean, hurry. Yeah, yep.
Going quiet and withdrawing is another one there. Another one said,
good one.
Does that mean in the car? Ooh.
Oh, that's not safe. But yeah, no, sometimes that sort of time pressure, I think that's probably to do with time pressure as well. We can sort of feel this sense of, and if we come back, I really like that example, because when we are feeling stressed, coming back into that neuroscience of our brain, it also sends this little message to our heart and our breathing that we need to be breathing faster and just going faster. So you'll find that when you're stressed, you want to do things in a hurry, whether it be driving the car or just trying to get out the door, or The
car one seems to be quite common there, Caroline. It's coming up with many people. But the one that perhaps is a bit different is that going quiet and withdrawing. And when I say different, only to the other things that have come up on the chat, that's all I mean.
Look, I think that's also really, really important. And thank you for mentioning that, Helen, is because we can do this differently. So while there'll be some commonalities, it's what the take-home message that I want to give you guys is that we're all a little bit different. So it's really normal for us to have our own ways of coping. And I have other family members that I know will do a similar thing. We'll just be much more quiet and quite, become quite withdrawn or just more introverted. And that's when I know, there's something going on there. They're not very chatty today. So yes, that's a really, really helpful one. Okay. Any more before I just move forward?
Yeah, there's a few more people saying that the quiet and withdrawn, or other people in their family are quiet and withdrawn as well. And as you said, family members that are quiet and withdrawn. Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to do something a little bit different. Now you don't have to join in, okay? There is no pressure to join in. You might just want to follow along. And the reason I say that is for those of you who might not have done lots of tuning into your body, this might feel a little bit uncomfortable. For those of you who are quite tuned into their body and aware of feelings and processing feelings, feel free to join in. But it's also totally cool just to kind of watch along. So I guess what this is tying into is that we're not aware, because we can't like feel our brain. We can't tell when our threat system has been activated. I've often thought about how cool it would be if you kind of had like a see-through brain and you could kind of see it. That probably sounds really gross. But I've often, it'd be kind of just so cool. We'd probably all look a little bit weird. But the point is that we don't know when certain parts of our brain are firing necessarily. But our brain, of course, is linked with our body. So what we need to do is actually tune into our body, because our body gives us these things that I call body clues, okay? So your body will give you all the clues you need to know that will tell you that you're feeling stressed. Okay, so this is something I've prepared earlier. It is a work of art. Look at it. It's amazing. Clearly, you don't need to be an artist to do this, but what I'd like you to all do is draw. Again, you don't have to participate. Let me withdraw that last comment. Draw a little gingerbread man, okay? Now, I'm going to take you through what my body clues are when I start to feel stressed. So yes, there are environmental barometers for us, which is a really nice place to start when we're talking about stress. But then when we want to get a little bit more clever, we start to think about how our body is feeling, okay? So for me, when I start to feel stressed, I'm going to give you some examples. Now, the other thing I want to say to you as well is that our body clues want to look the same, and that's also really okay. So when I start to feel stressed, I might tighten my jaw. The other thing that might happen for me is, believe it or not, I can talk even faster than this. I know, amazing. But the other thing that I do is I can sometimes, my breathing gets a little bit more shallow and kind of comes from my chest. So I have to say though, that's harder for me to be aware of. I'm more aware of the talky thing that I can do. So breathing. The other thing that can happen for me when I'm really stressed is yes, it can. I can sometimes get a bit of a tummy ache. Now, there are some other really common ones that other people can talk about. Some people talk about having a tightness in their chest. Some people talk about feeling like they get jelly legs. Some people can get headaches. So they can all look a little bit different. But the point is that when we start to tune into our body, that's when we can start to understand when we are feeling stressed. Now, obviously, I often talk to people about rating stress or worry out of 10. It is much more easier. There's my little scale. 0 to 10. It's much easier to pick how you're feeling when you're a 10 out of 10. I know when I'm a 10 out of 10, I am just all over body, just really stressed. It's much harder to pick when you're a 1 or a 2. So coming back to that awesome presentation that the lovely Rosie did about mindfulness. Mindfulness is a really cool thing that gets you to practice tuning into your body, which allows you to become a little bit more aware of when you're feeling anything. So that's why really clever people like Rosie talk about mindfulness a lot and really promote it. And I agree. It's pretty awesome thing to do. It's not for everybody, but it can be very helpful. Now, before I move on to the next slide, is that kind of all making sense? So it's really about body as being our clues and our compass to how we're feeling. Does that sound okay? Cool. All right. So, I need to share my screen again. So, there is me. That was our little exercise. So that's another little, you can see that's, the other one I didn't mention was doing a wee. That's very important. You'll notice that sometimes people feel the need to go to the toilet. That's also very normal. I did a nervous wee before this presentation, just saying. So the next slide is, I keep forgetting this is being recorded. I'm going to regret saying that about needing to do a wee.
I love
The
it.
next one is tying it all in terms of why is this even necessary? Why do we need to know about all this stuff, Caroline? And it's because what tends to happen is if we're not aware of what is filling up our stress bucket, or, you know, coming back to that little cup that I was talking to you about, yes. If we don't know what's in that cup, what tends to happen, and I'm sure you can all relate, is let's say this cup is totally full, all right? So I'm carrying lots of stress about work, about home. There's that hideous thing called COVID. And then the last thing happens. But the last thing that happens is the slippers on the floor. When my stress cup is totally full and I've let it accumulate, so I've let it become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I've not actually put anything in place to reduce my stress, what happens is the last thing, it's a bit like that expression that straw that broke the camel's back, is I will have what appears to be a very, very, an over-the-top response to something that looks quite small. I'm sure you can all relate to that. So even knowing this stuff inside out and back to front, that can definitely happen to me if I'm not careful, particularly when we all live very, very busy lives. And we all think, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, and I'm running at 100 miles an hour. And then before I know it, my stress bucket or cup is totally full, and I've overreacted to something that I would not usually do. So that's why clinicians like me talk about the importance of tools. If you look at that little diagram, it's like having a tap where we can slowly release stress in a sort of more graded, gradual way. So that's really, really important. So now some of you will have, like the lady who was saying she walks on the beach. That is an awesome thing to do because it brings you back into a more focused, present space. So I'm going to move to the next slide because I realised we don't have heaps of time. So these are some really handy things to think about. So being mindful of our little stress thermometer. Here are some nice body tools. So letting off steam, playing sport, gardening, playing instruments, and our brain tools. So that mindfulness stuff that I was talking to you about before. If you want to know more about that, I highly recommend you go back and listen to Rosie. It's a really beautiful way of summarising that. Because I don't have time to go into that either. But she summarises it beautifully. So they are just some examples. The other thing to think about when we think about these ways of managing stress, another term that we use all the time is their coping skills. So you will have a lot more coping skills than you realise, because we all have to have day-to-day ways of coping. And I'm sure some of you can probably tick off some of these things in this list as well. The trick though, people, is when you are cruising along and you think, I'm actually going okay right now, it's really easy to let go of those strategies that you use to keep you going along when you're feeling actually okay in yourself. So it's important, but there's a reason why. The reason often people are coping quite well and going well is they've got these things in their lives. So whether it be exercise or eating well, they all impact on our day-to-day functioning and just our general well-being and wellness. And I think it can trick us into sort of then letting go of some of those things. So the most important thing I can tell you in all of that is don't let them go, keep them going. So especially as, you know, as things start to go back to normal in the context of COVID, don't let go of some of those stress management things you might have started more recently. Keep them going even when you feel a little bit better in yourself. That's really, really important. Okay, so I'm going to go and tie this into sleep just towards the end of this presentation. So one thing I want to say to you guys is, obviously when we're carrying more stress in our bodies, we have these unhelpful hormones, and I say unhelpful in that they're normal and that actually allows us to respond to stress as we need to. But if we can't come down and reduce that stress, what happens is these sneaky little hormones then stay in our bloodstream, and it actually doesn't promote good sleep. So you can see in that second little picture that high cortisol level is kind of okay during the day, but we want that to kind of peter off because we also want this other cool hormone called melatonin to kick in so we can go to sleep. So it's actually really normal, this, when people talk about feeling stressed, is one of the first things, and certainly when COVID happened, for a lot of the people I knew, they were talking about, oh, my sleep is so terrible. And I was often saying, well, I think it's because we're all really stressed right now. And that was very, very common. I don't know if that was common for some of the participants today, but it was definitely a common one for a lot of people I know. So that's why it was your brain doing this really funky thing with the hormones, and it was preventing you from sleeping. So, okay, these are my top sleep tips. Bed is for sleeping and for intimacy only, okay? Do not make your bed a place where you sneak on the laptop or you're going to work from home, but you're going to work from your bedroom. Because our brain, what fires together, wires together. So our brain loves associations. Your brain will not associate going to sleep with your bed if you do other stuff in your bedroom. So it's really, really important that you keep your bed for sleep and for intimacy only. Don't underestimate the importance of your physical space. Okay, so there are I'm going to talk really quickly about the physical space. Temperature is really important. So they say about 18 degrees. So it's actually better to have a slightly cooler room, temperature room in your bedroom that will promote healthy sleep. Also, just promoting a space of calm is really, really important. So lighting as well. Lighting, melatonin, you know how I talked about that groovy hormone called melatonin? Melatonin gets released when it's darker. So limiting light, so screens, that includes screens, sorry. Limiting light is really, really important. You want to make sure that you give your body every opportunity to fall into sleep, which means keeping a dim light. Create a wind down routine. Routines, gosh, I could talk about routines forever. I won't. But it's really, really important that, a couple of hours before you're due to go to sleep, that you're not doing anything like, certainly don't exercise. You're meant to exercise during the day, but 3 hours before bed. So don't do it any closer than that. So if you go for a run and then expect to sort of go to sleep, that's not going to happen. So create a nice slow down, wind down routine. Remember,
I'm just going to wind you up a little bit there as you talk about wind down, but keep going. Okay. Finish the two off. I'm just very aware of the time.
Sorry, Ben. Sleep thieves and allies. What I mean by that are things like coffee. Don't have those after midday if you can avoid it. My top tip for caffeine, its half-life is 7 hours. Did you know that? So that's why people say don't drink coffee after midday, because it actually stays in your bloodstream for that long. The very, 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 very last one. If you are tossing and turning in your bed for more than 20 minutes, please get up. So it's really important that you get up, move around, and then try and go back to bed again.
I've just got a question for you. Somebody's asking, does Milo have caffeine? And I assume that's about the chocolate?
Milo is actually an energy drink. So it's about the sugar content.
Yep.
So I think people forget about high sugar foods right before bed aren't great. Sorry. So yes.
We are going to have to wind up, but let's look at these resources that you've got so people can do more.
Yeah. So again, if you want all the resources about apps, please watch David Backer's presentation. Amazing. he had some really awesome ones about routine as well, which ties into what I was saying before. But he also talks about some really cool apps that are about sleep. Smiling Mind have some awesome exercises about sleep, as do Calm. And there's a Headspace one, which is not Australian Headspace, it's UK Headspace. That web page, Head to Health, is a portal. So you can go in there, type in what you're after. It might not be about stress and sleep, it might be about other stuff. Go in there and type in what you're looking for, and it actually sends you to the websites and resources that you need. It's a awesome website. And then there are, of course, those other pages that also have heaps of resources about all things mental health. And guess what?
What?
I finished.
Oh, great. It was great, Kaz.
And he's like, oh my God.
No, I'm an old radio presenter, so I'm like, the news is about to come on. We're about to crash the news. But look, people are already saying thank you so much, Kaz. We love the way that you are so passionate about what you do every day, and the examples that you give and the metaphors, it's just brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing what you know. You, of course, know so much more, and if people would like to get in touch with Caroline, you can send us an email and we can hook you guys up. I've also put an email address for us in there, which is admin@healthytasmania.com.au. So admin@healthytasmania.com.au. While this is our last session, we will be doing some reporting and evaluation on how they've gone, and we really need to hear from you about what has been useful. So a couple of questions that you might be able to answer. You can do it right in the chat box if you want to, or you can send us an email if you'd rather do it privately, would be, what is it about the online format that worked well for you? And what is the best outcome that you've had from the mentally well sessions that you attended? We would love to hear your personal stories and how this was useful for you. We'd also like to hear if you've got any feedback. So if there is another time when we manage a program like this, we can make it even better for the people who come along. Just a reminder that the recordings will be on our Facebook page and the Starting Point Neighbourhood House's Facebook page, who also share it. If Facebook's not your thing, you can jump onto our website, healthytasmania.com.au. They'll be there. Share it with your friends. Tell other people who you think might find these sessions useful and would love to meet someone like Kaz and her smiley face and also her stressed face that we managed to see. So do, of course, share it around. We've absolutely loved having you here. And as I said, it's that effect of the clap. Now that you know this stuff, I know that it's going to echo out amongst the people around you and amongst your community members, because, as we start to learn knowledge, that's just how it works, because we can't help but talk about it and share it and change the way that we do things. So, Caroline, thank you very much for being part of these sessions.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all too for coming along each week, whether this was your 4th, your 5th, your 1st. We know about the time that you need to take out from everything else that you're doing to come here and learn to be able to support yourself and support those around you. So we really appreciate it. And thank you to our awesome partners at the Starting Point Neighbourhood House. I know you're there watching together. Give yourselves a big clap, because it's just amazing what you do, and the other people from neighbourhood houses around Tasmania who have joined in the last sessions too. We just love the work that you do in your communities and love to be able to partner with you on different projects. So that's all from us. Over and out. We hope to see you again on a different session like this, and thanks for the feedback that's coming through. It's been really great. Cheerio.